Fantastic. Well, hey, thanks everybody for coming. I know it's been a long week, and a lot of content. I'm sure a lot of you have been drinking from the fire hose and trying to make rhyme or reason of some of the product portfolio announcements here this week. Today, I'm really going to more focus on S/4HANA, but more from a cloud perspective, and then also kind of differentiate from, your options of deployment between on-prem, single-tenant cloud, and multi-tenant cloud. And we'll also kind of interject some kind of key considerations when it comes to the infrastructure and how you plan for it, and then also kind of some of the business transformation change while trying to make the black box of S4 a little bit invisible to the business users, right? Now, everybody's probably already heard the S/4HANA story ad nauseum this week, right? So I'm not going to spend too much amount of time. But however, there is one thing that I want to have as kind of a key takeaway, right? So for those that are kind of looking at S4 as an opportunity to get to either a modern platform, get later release, maybe you're just looking at 2025, and that's the primary reason that you're looking at S4. I'm sure that's a lion's share of the kind of the opinions around it. The one thing I will say that you really should take a look at is when you really value the amount of effort, energy that it takes to kind of sustain your current environment from all aspects of it, whether it's on the infrastructure side, whether it's at the application layer, or in the business innovation and velocity that you give to your organizations. There is an opportunity of simplification so that you can innovate at a faster pace. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about throughout the presentation. So from an S/4HANA perspective, right, it's always been about trying to more tightly integrate in real time disparate systems, but forget about the systems for a moment. It's really around the business networks, right? So whether you're on the finance side, whether you're supply chain side, whether you're on the IT side where you're having to facilitate complex EDI transactions or having to connect to comprehensive B2B networks in Ariba-like, a solution. The key thing is S/4HANA does, play a central role. You kind of hear that expression, the digital core. I kind of think of it as the central heart, right? And now, if you want to take care of your heart, sometimes you have to have the heart surgery. So I know people kind of think that it's an open heart surgery to move from point A to point B, and it can be, but I think there's things that you can do proactively and preemptively when you're looking at your journey to kind of simplify that, so it's not such an obtrusive exercise. So let's talk about the 3 deployment paths. And this even when I created this is about 4 months ago, and even in 4 months' time, this has changed probably about 5 times as far as how SAP positions the different S/4HANA deployment options. So on-prem, still the classical model. You can take that as the S/4HANA solution that is configurable, customizable, though we call that a 4-letter word in our world. But you can deploy it on your own infrastructure or in your own data centers, right? So that's historically what everybody is accustomed to. Now, from a cloud perspective, SAP really has 3 primary deployment options now. There's the single tenant, there is a HANA Enterprise Cloud, and there is the multi-tenant or now S/4HANA Cloud solution. So even this is even a little bit dated, because when you hear S/4HANA Cloud, they were really talking about the multi-tenant. And you'll see single tenant distinguished. You have to see single tenant in the name for it to know that the single tenant exists, right? But the kind of things that we were really trying to kind of depict here is what are the kind of key things that you have to take in consideration, right? So from a scope perspective, the single tenant and on-prem or the HANA Enterprise Cloud version of it is full ERP functionality, right? There is, you have still complete malleability on how you change the rules engine, the configuration engine, but there's some disparity between how you consume it, right? So on-prem, traditional license model, user-based, everybody, the majority of the customers have that. But then from a single tenant perspective, and this is where you start diverging, right? Single subscription contract. So single tenant, though the pace of change isn't as frequent as the multi-tenant option, there is a 2 times a year management that SAP will manage on your behalf to the core. So you're including your application management services are part of their subscription. They control a lot of the technical work, but under your guidance. And you still have responsibility around the security, the deployment. You actually still can use the traditional GUI. So for those technologists here, you can still use your their traditional GUI or on-prem GUI to leverage S4. And then all the way to the right is the multi-tenant, right? And that's for a lot of people, it's been more of a paradigm shift because now it's a true SaaS solution where the changes are coming, no matter whether you choose to or not, they're coming on a quarterly basis. But really it's a true SaaS type solution where you're not really concerned about the infrastructure layer, right? You're not having to worry about the planning for hardware or the application management services around that. Now, what I think if you heard a lot of the content today and when talking to other clients, I think there's been a lot of interest in what the single tenant or the HANA Enterprise Cloud option provides, and there's still a lot of customers that are investing into their own infrastructure, and that are looking at hardware, they're looking at operating system, and obviously SUSE being kind of a key partner in managing the operating systems and including for SAP themselves. There's still a lot of key considerations when you're looking at the on-prem path as well. So a question that I get asked quite frequently is, okay, so if I am looking at S4HANA and then looking at S4HANA Cloud, where do I begin, right? We keep on hearing that, a technical lift and shift, there's, prescriptive processes, to get from point A, point B, you're really kind of, you're really just moving what you have today into a new kind of outer shell. And there's some value associated to that, but I think where a lot of people get stuck is that when they focus on the technology side of it, they lose in that fact, why are you doing that change in the first place? Yes, 2025, we'll go back to that, there's a reason to look at that date, but if we can add some incremental business value, all the better. So I always say, to my customers that are looking at what deployment options that they have, is to first ask, what does the business need? Where's your business heading? Even if you're doing a migration, right, there's still some opportunities like just some consolidated transactions to make it easier to do order management, easier to do MRP, right? Those are things that are our opportunities, and really that should drive the conversation rather than I just need to do a technical upgrade. So you have to kind of examine your processes, examine where there's some opportunities, and leverage that as your mechanism to shape your program, right? So even though you might do it in pieces, maybe you do it whole scope and you do it overnight and you do a complete greenfield implementation, make the decision because you've evaluated and you've actually asked the questions of each of your business leaders and have them have a stake in the ground and have a vested interest and actually take ownership of it rather than the IT organization. Okay? So key consideration. So now the other thing is, you've probably heard is that there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of things that maybe potentially change that impact the business. Now, SAP has gotten better about making the processes that are defined or are available within S4, they've done a better job of documenting them, right? So, some of you might be aware, some of you may not be aware. So every single standard industry practice for S4 is documented. It's also described, and there's a recorded demonstration of it, and the best practices explore. So if you want to say, okay, well, right now, we're 10-year-old financial structure in our current ECC system. I can go to S4HANA, I can go look at the universal ledger and see how it's configured, how it's defined, how it could leverage. I can see it in action, and actually can even do it in a trial system. So a lot of customers don't even realize that the asset's available, so you can actually start doing some of that beginning work to prepare for the project, as well as to be able to convey the change that's going to be transformed into the business. So in the presentation, I think it'll be available to everybody that registers. That link is a public domain site that you can access. So it's not, you don't require any user ID to get to it. But it's a really, really precise tool, because even before you get into a workshop, you can actually start doing your own exploration and getting prepared. Oops. Now, deployment options. So we did already talk through some of the options, but also one thing to note is there is now also a trend of, you'll hear this term, hybrid deployments. Because say you've been, on an ECC environment for 12 years, you're a multinational, large organization, to go from point A to point B in 8 months might be a difficult exercise, so you want to do it in pieces. Some customers have actually elected to go to S/4HANA Cloud for one business unit and then start to move their business slowly but surely to the other environment. Or they move pieces of the business to a single tenant cloud and still keep on-prem for corporate services. But the integrations between the options now are more mature than they ever have before. So financial information flows, I can still have material availability, visibility, even if I have one part of the business that's on a plan on an on-prem side and the other is on the cloud side, and I'm taking the order on the cloud system, I could still have visibility of my ECC, inventory or my S4 on-prem inventory. So that two-way integration exists already today. It's not available for all the thousands of processes, but that library is continually growing as SAP innovates on their newer releases. Now, whether you do the technical lift and shift, or you're doing a brownfield or doing greenfield deployment, obviously change is always going to be key, right? Now, I'm always, it's funny because when cloud first started to come around in SAP, there was always kind of the stigma of saying, well, if it's cloud, it's easier to implement, doesn't require as much IT resources, it's intuitive, so the business can learn it on the go, right? You stop me if you've heard some of these comments before. In reality, it's still a change, right? Whether you use cloud, you use on-prem, whether you're doing just a technical upgrade, there's going to be change, right? And nothing stops momentum of adoption than surprises by the business saying, wait a minute, I've always been able to do my output determination or create an order this way, but now I have to switch over to Adobe Forms. I'm not accustomed to doing that. You're impacting the business, right? So there is things that you have to kind of plan for. So whether the transformation is large, I like to say you either use the capital T for transformation or little t. There is going to be some sort of transformation of some sort, right? So whether you're IT side or whether you're business side and you're trying to plan for these things, realize that. Because even if you do a technical migration, there's still going to be transactions that are deprecated. There are going to be new versions of them, and you're going to have to train people, right? So there is going to be some business impact, right? Now, if you're existing, right, and you're coming from a very highly customized, complex deployment, there will be change, right? Because with that simplification, right, there's going to be things that customizations that have to be addressed, may not work in the new environment, so you're going to have to plan and consider that. Okay? So really, because I think I'm doing well for time here, really when you're looking at S/4HANA Cloud, now maybe raise of hands, who's actually running on some version of a cloud product for SAP? Anybody? Over there? Here? Okay. So what you're seeing is that the best practices that, as far as how to run and maintain them, how to deployment, the acumen that's been built compared to the on-prem world, right? The on-prem ERP has been around for 44 years. SAP has delivered that. So we've kind of got a cadence of how to run it. We got a general intuition of what's the best practices to manage it and deploy it. Cloud is being formed and shaped today, right? So when you look at cloud, there's some great opportunity, right? But there's some things that you absolutely have to account for that maybe is not documented, right? So if I'm going to deploy to cloud, but I have on-prem resources, right? Or I want to migrate my environments from infrastructure that is in my data centers, but then to a private cloud, data centers. These are things that you're not going to see on a presentation, marketing material. It's not the selling point. It's not what's going to be on the business case to the leadership. But by the way, if you don't plan for them, they're going to get you, right? They're going to slow down your project. There's going to be some big changes associated to it. So really kind of pull back the covers, but from all pillars when you're looking at the cloud path and determining it. There is no cookie cutter approach. All right, you probably didn't hear saying, okay, well, you're this place, in your decision, is there a tipping point where I need to look at cloud versus on-prem? You really have to kind of evaluate it by your own scorecard. That's why it's important to kind of look at your own internal processes, your own internal landscape, so you can formulate a point of view, so you can make an appropriate decision, right? So there's some great things, and customers have been able to garner some significant value by looking at cloud or hybrid deployments or pure on-prem. But again, it's the lens that you look at it to make that kind of decision. So.
You're all done, Abe?
I'm good. And I was going to say, is there any questions from the group?
Hey, if they've got questions, can they come up and ask you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's give Abe a big hand. He was awesome.
Thank you very much.